Plenty of rugby news going on around the world ahead of this weekend's warm-up games before the Rugby World Cup, and I'm going to cover some of those stories right now in this show. Hello everyone and welcome to Inside Rugby. My name's Mark. I'm a rugby fan from New Zealand that's living in Cancun in Mexico. And in today's video I'm going to have a look at some of the rugby news that's happening around the world, as well as giving my predictions for this weekend's warm-up games before the Rugby World Cup. Okay, so we have 7 warm-up games happening this weekend across the world before the Rugby World Cup kicks off in a few weeks' time. And it's really the last chance for some of the coaches to see some of these players in action. Of course, Fabien Galthié, the French coach, has not named his World Cup squad yet. So he'll be looking at his players as they line up against Fiji this weekend, and to see if any of them step up wanting to put their name on that French sheet to play in their home World Cup, which of course is a big opportunity for all of those French players. So why don't we go through the list of games now, and I'll give you my predictions on what I think is going to happen this weekend. So first up, my prediction on the Wales versus South Africa game being played at the Principality Stadium in Cardiff, a beautiful stadium, but I don't think it's going to be a home ground coming for Wales this weekend. Unfortunately, they've lost 3 players who were named in their starting 15 to play against the Springboks this weekend. They include Liam Williams, Dan Beggar and Alex Cuthbert. So not good news there for Wales, and they're going to really put in an inexperienced backline against South Africa this weekend, and I think that's going to cause them all sorts of troubles. I was expecting a South African win anyway in this game, but now because of those 3 injuries occurring to the Wales squad members, I think it's going to be a bigger margin. So I'm picking South Africa to win this game by 16 points. I think the Springboks forwards, and particularly those coming in off the bench, are going to be too big and too strong for the Welsh team this weekend. And I think South Africa has too much power and pace outside, and they will get through this Welsh defence and score a number of tries. So my prediction is South Africa are going to beat Wales by 16 points. Next up is Ireland versus England at the Aviva Stadium in Dublin, and I'm picking Ireland to win this game by at least 10 points. I think we are going to see a better England team turn up this weekend, and I'm going to put that down to the whole Owen Farrell controversy that's going on. I think in some way it's going to galvanise that England team, and they are going to play better without Owen Farrell in the team. But I don't think it's going to be enough, and I think Ireland have got too many weapons across the park, and I think they're going to win too much ball, particularly in the breakdown phases of this particular game. So a 10-point win at least for Ireland at Aviva Stadium in Dublin this weekend. Now on to the next game, and perhaps the most interesting game of the weekend for me anyway, and this is France against Fiji in France. And I think it's an opportunity for us to see really where Fiji rugby is at the moment, because we are hearing a lot of good things. And we're seeing a lot of good things. Their game against Japan was very good, and it finally looks like Fiji have sorted out their forward play, and we know how amazingly athletic, powerful, strong and fast they are in the backs. And it's always been a case that Fiji have not been able to win consistent ball from set pieces, and it seems their forwards are playing a lot better now. So this is a real test for Fiji in the weekend. They're up against France, one of the favourite teams for the World Cup in a few weeks' time, and we're going to be able to really see where this Fiji team is at the moment. Now don't forget, the last time that Fiji bet France was in France in 2018. The score on that occasion was 21 points to 14 to Fiji. And are we going to see another upset this weekend? I don't think so. I think that France are going to win this game. And there's a couple of reasons why I think France will win this game. The first reason is that I think they will be too consistent across 80 minutes for Fiji. I think we will see moments of Fiji brilliance in this game, there's no doubt about it, but I think the French pack will control eventually the set pieces across the 80 minutes, And I think the Fiji discipline will also be a factor in this game. I see them giving away too many penalties that France are going to be able to convert into points. Other than that, I think we're going to see some amazing Fiji play like we always do. And there's no doubt that they're probably the second team in everybody's choices across the world of rugby. So expect an exciting game. Expect France, this particular France team, to take it to Fiji, and expect a good response from Fiji. But across the 80 minutes, I think France will be too strong, and I see them coming out victors by 10 points in this game. Then we have Italy against Romania, and this is a pretty interesting game, although I think Kieran Crowley's team in Italy will get up and win this game against Romania. They seem to be getting a little bit better, Italy, each game, and I'm hoping that for Crowley's sake they can continue that trajectory in this game against Romania. I have Italy winning this game by 15 points over Romania, and we'll see what Romania's got as far as their preparation goes for the Rugby World Cup. Looking forward to seeing them play, actually. So there we go. My pick is Italy by 15 points over Romania this weekend. Then we have Samoa playing against the Barbarian 15 this weekend, an interesting game. And Samoa are at that stage at the moment where they're not able to show consistency across 80 minutes of rugby. There's no doubt that they've got a lot of talent in this team, and the talent hasn't been seen across a consistent level of play throughout the Pacific Nations Cup. So I'm expecting a small win for Samoa against the Barbarians by about 6 points. But let's wait and see what the Barbarians can turn on in this game against Samoa. Then we have Uruguay against Argentina 15. This is not the Argentinian first team. This is an Argentinian first 15 that's been put together. And I think Uruguay are going to have some troubles again against Argentinian 15. And I say again because they've been beaten by them before in previous weeks. So I'm putting this down to a win to the Argentinian 15 by 15 points. And Uruguay are on their continued journey to be part of the bigger world rugby community. Of course, they're playing in this year's Rugby World Cup. It's going to be interesting to see how they go there. But I think they're going to struggle a little bit against this Argentinian 15 this weekend. And then the final warm-up game this weekend is between Georgia and the United States. It's a shame the United States are not in the Rugby World Cup this year. Of course, they will be hosting the event in 2031. And they are getting better and better with each week's play, but they seem to be struggling a little bit in the forwards. Now, Georgia are the 11th best ranked team in the world of rugby at the moment, so that puts them just behind Wales, which we all need to consider. And I think we see Georgia, or I see Georgia winning this game by at least 10 points this weekend. So it'll be really interesting to see if Georgia can get some momentum going before they head into the Rugby World Cup. And I see them being able to do that against this United States team. So there we go, some really interesting warm-up games. I think the standout for me this weekend is going to be to see how Fiji goes against France. It's going to be a really interesting one, and I think it's going to put a benchmark down for how Fiji are going to perform in this year's Rugby World Cup. They haven't put their first string team in, and that's something to consider this weekend. So it's going to give those players that are still vying to get into that first run-on team for Fiji an opportunity to shine, and sometimes that's all they need to be able to perform on the big stage. So I know that the Fijian coach is expecting a lot. He's got a talent all across the park in this team, and I think for one it's going to be one of the games of the weekend. Quick news across the world of rugby, and the Australian Wallabies are on the plane heading to Europe for their final warm-up games before they head into the Rugby World Cup. And it was a pretty interesting departure for Eddie Jones and his group as they flew out of Sydney Airport yesterday. And the first news that I have to share is Brad Davis, who's the assistant coach of the Australian Wallabies, has resigned and walked away from the team just as they head off to Europe. And the reason behind this was given family reasons, so I'm sure there'll be more information coming out about that in the future. But I think the real news-grabbing event happened at Sydney Airport as Eddie Jones was being interviewed before the departure of the Wallabies, and he got quite upset with the Australian press, and I tell you what, quite rightly so. I've lived in Australia for quite a long time, and the press is a very negative bunch of people when it comes to their sporting stars. We've all heard of the tall poppy syndrome, and it lives strong and hard in the Australian community. And whenever a team is down, there's nothing like giving them a good kick. And as all of us love Eddie Jones, he's not one to walk away from a battle. So he decided to take on the Australian press at this last press conference, give them a hard time and tell them they're all a negative bunch of geezers, basically. Maybe not in those particular words. But it was good to see Eddie in fine form, and he's going to take that Australian team now with a lot of energy, very little in the way of expectations, and I think that makes them very, very dangerous heading into this Rugby World Cup. If they can get a couple of good wins under their belt to start off with, and even in these last warm-up games that they've got coming up, which is one of them is against France, I think we'll see some real fire from the Australians in this Rugby World Cup. And then it'll be interesting to see how the Australian press. So the Wallabies are on the plane heading to Europe for their final warm-up games. Eddie Jones is on fire. I think he's going to be one of the entertaining figures throughout this Rugby World Cup. Win, lose or draw, I'm sure we can rely on Eddie for some fun. So there's some news out of Australia. Now heading over the ditch to New Zealand, and some unfortunate news there. Shannon Frizzell has tweaked a hamstring ahead of the New Zealanders' departure from New Zealand to head to Europe for their warm-up game before the Rugby World Cup. It's unlikely that Frizzell will start now against France, and in particular against the Springboks at Twickenham. So he's going to be pretty much in the same boat as Brodie Retallick is, and we'll expect to see Shannon Frizzell back and available for selection against Namibia in New Zealand's second pool game in the Rugby World Cup. So there we go, Shannon Frizzell's done a hamstring tweak and won't be available for either the Springboks game or the first game against France. So a little bit of a concern for the All Blacks, a little bit of shuffling of their squad will have to go on. That's Frizzell and Brodie Retallick now both getting on the plane injured, and we'll have to see how those particular injuries pan out over the coming weeks. Ian Foster said that Brodie Retallick's injury is responding well to rehab, but a little bit too early to say how quickly he could be back, and they're going to wait another week before they make any definitive noise on that one. Good news for New Zealand rugby though, Joe Moody is back playing, and this weekend on Sunday he will play for Canterbury against Manawatu in the local domestic competition. And he's been out since May with a bad ankle injury which he had to have surgery on, Joe Moody, and he would have been probably one of the first selected in the All Blacks team to go to this Rugby World Cup. So it's good to see him getting back on the pitch again, and who knows, we might see Joe Moody play a role in the All Blacks Rugby World Cup squad and journey at some stage. Let's see how he goes on Sunday first. World Rugby rankings, and this weekend could see a big change in a lot of the teams' positions in the Rugby World rankings if a whole lot of outcomes go a certain way. Ireland could lose their #1 world ranking to the All Blacks this weekend if a few of the combinations of game results go against them, and we'll have to wait and see. So I'll do a roundup on Monday after all the games and give you a finalisation of the latest world rankings as they come out, because there's too many permutations to go through right now in case we see some changes. But up for grabs this weekend is South Africa can definitely go ahead of France in the world rankings if they beat Wales, and we could see Fiji go up to #6 in the world if a number of results go their way this weekend, and that will be the highest ranking for Fiji in World Rugby since World Rankings started. So that would be an enormous achievement for Fiji. But as I say, a number of results need to go in a certain way for that to happen. Wales also have an opportunity to climb a few places this weekend if they do beat South Africa by a certain number of points. But again, as I say, a lot of different scenarios need to unfold this weekend in the world rankings. So before we go into this weekend, the top 10 of the world rankings in men's rugby stand as Ireland 1, New Zealand 2, France 3, South Africa 4, Scotland 5, England 6, Argentina 7, Australia 8, Fiji 9, and Wales are in 10th place. So let's check those early next week and we'll see if there's any changes going into the Rugby World Cup. So of course we've had the Owen Farrell news this week, which has been grabbing headlines across the world of rugby. Everybody's got an opinion and a point of view on this particular one. But for me, after the dust has settled, I think there's a few things that we need to continue looking at, and that's the way that the world game has run from a judicial point of view, but also from a growth and expansion point of view. Yes, we need to focus on athlete well-being and particular head injuries. That has to be a number one priority within the sport, but we've also got to look at how the sport is going to grow around the world and what's going to attract parents putting their kids into rugby at the lowest levels of the game. So there's a fine line that has to be walked there. World Rugby comes under a lot of criticisms for the way that they run the game at all sorts of different levels, and I'm interested to hear your views here on my channel about how you would improve World Rugby. It's all very well to say get rid of the old cronies that are running the game today, but I'm more interested in hearing about solutions and things around ideas that can be put forward to improve the great game that we love. So if you're sitting there and you've got some ideas on how we can improve World Rugby, throw them out to me here on this channel. I am going to be in the future interviewing people from the World Rugby organization right here on my channel, and I'll put some of those questions to them on the ideas that you might have to improve the game. So the Owen Farrell case for me has thrown up a number of things that need to be looked at, particularly around the process of what happens in this type of situation. We have the referee involved. In this case, we had the bunker system involved. We had an independent judicial committee set up and involved, and then we had World Rugby coming in with an appeal process. So are there too many cooks in the kitchen, and how do we empower those people to make the right decisions at the right time in the games that we are all watching and loving across the world? So I think the process needs to be looked at. Have the right people got the right power, and is there an issue when it comes to the judicial system and the way that players in particular are supported when they have to front a judicial committee? And one of the points I'd like to raise here is maybe there's an opportunity to learn from other sport and see whether or not there could be a pool of international lawyers that step up and offer their services to players regardless of what tier of rugby nation they come from, to be represented in front of the judicial system. I know that a lot of people watching my videos have talked about the money behind English rugby, and they are being able to get the most expensive lawyers on board to help in Owen Farrell's case, and that may not be the case with nations like Samoa and Tonga and Fiji, and that would be an interesting solution perhaps, to have an international panel of lawyers available to represent players from any nation. Let me know what you think of that idea. Is it a stab in the dark, or have you got something better up your sleeve that you'd like to put forward to sort out this issue we have in international rugby? So I'm sure we're going to hear more about this Owen Farrell case once World Rugby's appeal goes forward, and we'll continue the saga. I'm looking for more deep and meaningful solutions, not just bagging Owen Farrell for his tackle technique or lack thereof, but looking for solutions that can protect the game, protect the players, and make it more appealing for rugby fans across the world. So I'd love to hear your ideas on that one. Now, bringing this little show to an end, I just want to highlight an interview I saw the other day between Simon Jordan, a well-known pundit from the UK, who was having an interview with Warren Gatland over about an hour. It was a very good interview, I thought. Particularly, it gave Warren Gatland an opportunity to share a lot about himself, the reasons behind why he has taken up the job again at Wales, and I will actually link the interview in the description of this video if you're interested in watching it. I thought it was a very honest and transparent interview from Gatland. It also provided a lot of insights to how he manages his group of players and the environment around him, how important his wife is in the process, and he also talks about the lack of expectations when it comes to going to the World Cup this year, and how that's going to help the Welsh team in being able to maybe exceed the expectations that they have from a nation point of view, but also from a rugby union point of view. So if you haven't seen it, check it out. It's a very good interview, I thought, of Warren Gatland by Simon Jordan, and gives you a great insight to the man himself from New Zealand, but also his beliefs as a rugby coach and leader within that Welsh rugby group. So there we go, folks. That's it for this short video. Some updated rugby news from around the world, combined with my predictions for this weekend's warm-up games before we head to the World Cup. Just a few weeks to go now, getting super excited by that. And hopefully by that time I'll get my pronunciation of all the rugby names of players across the world much more accurate before we head into the big dance. And thank you to everybody that's pulling me up on my horrendous pronunciation of some of the names across the rugby world. I've only been doing this for 6 weeks, so I'm learning as quickly as I can, and you're helping me on that process, so thank you very much for that. Okay, that's it for me. Enjoy the rugby this weekend. Everybody stay safe, stay well, and I'll see you again soon with a full review of the games across the weekend. Until then, bye for now.